There's a holy heck of a mess that appears to be developing in Tampa, Florida, involving Jameis Winston. An account from an Uber driver that occurred back in March of 2016. This Uber driver, she alleged that Jameis Winston groped her in a drive-through of a Mexican restaurant in Scottsdale, Arizona. He was coming off of his rookie season with the Bucs. He denied the allegation that became public through a BuzzFeed report in 2017. She said that she and Jameis were the only people in the car. He sexually assaulted me, and I have every right to tell the damn truth about it, she told BuzzFeed. Ronald Darby, who now plays for the Philadelphia Eagles, who was a teammate of Jameis Winston's in college, said at the time publicly that the account was wrong because not only wasn't Jameis in the front seat of the car, he was in the back seat, but he was in the back seat with him. Ronald Darby at the time said there were three of us in the car, not just one, as has been reported. Myself and Jameis were in the back seat. I'm confident that nothing inappropriate in nature happened in the car that evening, and Jameis did not have any physical contact with the Uber driver. The accusations are just not true. And when this came out in BuzzFeed in November of 2017, that's when the league started investigating, which is why there were some reports yesterday that the 3-game suspension that's being handed down to Jameis Winston, not official yet, but that's expected to come down on Jameis Winston, was because he didn't report the incident right away as is required by the collective bargaining agreement. To help us make heads or tails of all this, Bucs beat writer and columnist for the Tampa Bay Times, Rick Stroud. How are you, Rick?
I'm doing well, Rich. I'm doing good. And I'll start where you ended there as far as not reporting. I mean, at the time that this occurred, at the end of his rookie season, there was no such stipulation that players had to report. That came later in December.
Okay.
And I can tell you with confidence that that is not a factor in this case at all. They spent 8 months investigating this case. They interviewed a ton of witnesses. There is a he said, she said element to it. We've seen on NFL Network, they reported that, that Darby wasn't in the car the entire time, apparently. We still don't know who the alleged third passenger was because Winston and no one will tell anyone. So there's a lot of conflicting things. But as far as this notion, and I think it was put out, by a Tallahassee radio show host, and it feels like so much spin. But my information or my reporting is that is not why he's getting 3 games, and it's for violating the player conduct penalty code because it's very broad. And let's face it, we know what Jameis came into the league with, and now he's had 2 of these allegations, and so he's going to get a minimum of 3 games and possibly more if he doesn't, do what the NFL is going to require him to do. That will likely be undisclosed.
Yeah, and I want to say that, again, just now that I was giving all the details, that he wasn't charged with anything, and he wasn't convicted, obviously, of anything if he wasn't charged. The only thing that did happen to him is that Uber suspended his account. He needed to find a different way to get rides around town, wherever town he was in, Rick. But that also doesn't mean that the league can't suspend him under its policy. When it is all said and done, how is this sitting with Tampa management, Rick?
Well, they're disappointed. I mean, this is the thing that you fear, right? I mean, it's the old saying, you can lay down on hay, you may get 8 hours sleep, but you're going to wake up scratching. Well, they woke up scratching today. And, they interviewed 70 people, before they drafted him, and it was a polarizing pick, and they had their choice between him and Marcus Mariota. The irony is that Lovie Smith was the guy at the time that was so on board with Jameis. He, of course, got fired after his second year. Dirk Cutter said openly he'd have taken Marcus Mariota because he was friends with Mark Halpin and just knew more about him. Now, Dirk is very much a Jameis guy now, and this is going to fall squarely on him and Jason Light, who have already on the hot seat after a 5-win season. Now Jameis is going to miss the first 3 games at minimum. Those are huge games at New Orleans, home against the Super Bowl champion Eagles, home on a Monday night game against Pittsburgh. Then they go to Chicago. Presumably he could play then. Then there's a bye week, and 4 of his first 5 games would be on the road. So this is not going to help their season. It's pretty much what they feared.
Rick Stroud, Tampa Bay Times here on the Rich Eisen Show. So how does this play out? You say it could be more, and we haven't. I mean, it's come out that the suspension's coming. We don't know how much or when it's official. What can you tell us, Rick?
Well, I mean, it could be as early as today. It could drag on to the next week is what we know. And look, these things are not done in a vacuum. There's a lot of conversation between the league, obviously, and Jameis's representatives. The information that we have, and Adam Schefter, I think, has reported this too, that there probably won't be an appeal, although that's still a possibility. And I think the reason why there won't is that he wants to move forward. He wants to put this behind him. It's not that he's accepting the version that was put out there by the Uber driver. And you mentioned there was never a criminal charge or so far a civil suit, although I would anticipate there'd be one later. But I think, as far as the more part goes, like I said, when the NFL does send the letter and does make this official, it may not be enumerated, but I think there will be things that want him to accomplish, as far as whether that's counseling or whatnot, as safeguards. And certainly if he were to do, if there are any more of these incidents come forward, they could add games. But right now it looks like a minimum of 3 games, and we'll see what happens when the league finally gets around to announcing the suspension.
And the team's already picked up his 5th-year player option for $20 million and change, but that's only guaranteed with injury. Is it entirely possible that we see how the season plays out and the Bucs move on, as opposed to putting $20 million in the hands of somebody who, with this incident, has proven to be untrustworthy?
Yeah, I think it's reasonable to say that he is playing for his career in Tampa, and that, he'll have a chance to come back. I mean, everything is still in front of him. All outward appearances since his rookie year, he's done the right things. He's going to have his first child in July. He's getting married. He started a foundation. He spends a lot of time in the community. There's so much good about Jameis, but I think that, he's going to have to win. I mean, this is a guy that's only won 18 games in 3 years as the number 1 overall pick. And, he went to a horrible football team, but at some point the winning has to happen. As far as the $20 million, you're right. It's guaranteed only against injury. If he's healthy and passes a physical in March, they can decide not to give him that contract. So let's spin it forward and say, okay, they don't have a great year, and maybe he plays okay, maybe he doesn't, but Dirk Cutter and Jason Light gets fired. Now you're looking at a situation where a new head coach is coming in here, evaluating things top to bottom. Do they really want to have one more year of Jameis Winston? I mean, so there's a lot at stake for him in Tampa right now, and for his career. I mean, he has put himself in a position that he told the league he would avoid. He went to the NFL 2 weeks before the start of the draft and, requested a meeting with Roger Goodell, spent 5 hours in the NFL office. I would imagine telling them that you won't have a problem with me, and then this has happened. So he's playing for his career in Tampa and maybe in the NFL.
Well, last one for you here, Rick, because I'm sure some of fans listening to us or watching us right now heard what you said a couple of questions ago, and I just want to touch upon it again from what you just said, I guess, over the last several minutes. If he is, turning his life around to the fact that he's getting married, having a kid, he's going to be a dad, he's got a foundation, and you're being suspended for grabbing a woman's crotch, wouldn't you fight that instead of saying, I want to turn the page? I mean, this is certainly with a contract and millions on the line, Rick?
Yeah, it's reasonable to think that, but there's a couple things. One, we've seen where these appeals go, right? Nobody wins them, and they don't win them because they usually boil down to, does the NFL have the right to investigate, to make a decision and punish? And the answer is yes. They gave that away in the CBA. Okay, so you could fight it, but when you do, what happens? Now the NFL's investigative report, which at this point is not being shared by anybody except to Jameis and his representatives, that all becomes public now, because now the NFL is going to try the merits of the case. And we'll hear things about due process, which we know doesn't really exist, nor does it have to. So I think from a PR standpoint, it may not be what Jameis wants out there. We don't know what, culpability he has. We don't know what his story was. Maybe he prefers it that way. So there's a lot of motivations, and I'm sure it's a tough call. I'm sure people will look at it as, maybe an admission of guilt, which is not necessarily. But I think that, I think that he's got to make the best decision for himself and for his football team. That's another thing. Like, what's the week-to-week drama and the cost of the stays and the appeal, and he's going to play this week, is he not? take his 3 games, move on, try to have a great season.
Rick, appreciate the time and the information. We'll chat soon.
Thanks, Rich.
You got it. It's Rick Stroud, Tampa Bay Times.
The Rich Eisen Show, weekdays at noon Eastern on Audience.